Keith Morrison sat down for an interview with Lori Daybell from jail, where she's awaiting trial on 2 separate cases. One is involving her former husband, Charles Vallow, and the other is involving her former nephew-in-law, Brandon Boudreaux. He still is alive. Sadly, Charles Vallow is not. This interview made huge waves because of Lori's willingness, number one, to go on TV weeks before a high-profile trial, but also because of her behavior. So, Keith Morrison sat down with another one of our favorite reporters. Okay, that would be Nate Eaton from East Idaho News. Make sure you check out all his stuff. Follow him on all platforms, especially if you are following him for this case specifically. So they sat down to talk about Keith's experience of going to talk to Lori. So in today's video, we're going to discuss the highlights of that and look at some video clips of it. So let's go ahead and jump on in. Hello everybody and welcome back to the sofa. Sofa ain't back there, but I'm right here. My name's Paul if you are new to this channel. If you're not new, well, guess what? My name's still Paul. Now, I am kind of in the process of changing sofa locations. So I'm recording at the old sofa location, so it's kind of empty around here. I apologize for the echo. I'm working on that and we'll soon be back to regularly scheduled programming, if you will. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today, like I said, is looking at that interview, and I'm going to be making commentary along the way. I'll talk about some of the highlights, things that I felt stuck out about it, and we'll look at some of the clips as well. So let's go ahead and just dive on into that interview. Again, it's between Nate Eaton and Keith Morrison. Now, Nate and Keith will discuss the fact that this is like the 7th episode that he has done on this tragic case, and how it's like the most that he's done for a case, but it honestly calls for that.
Will that be the last one? We don't know.
I love how Keith is self-aware of his ominous, will that be the last one? We don't know. Even Lori made light of this in the interview with him. Now, Keith will say that they had been in communications with Lori going back and forth, and that she kept dangling possibilities in front of them. And we saw this behavior even in the interview, right? Some of the things she would say and do. And Keith will say that ultimately one of their producers, Brittany, was able to secure the interview.
I was very surprised, frankly. Get this call. Lori can interview with us, and the jail says it's okay.
Yeah, we were surprised too, right? For all the reasons. She's getting ready to go to trial. She was just in the hearing, her pre-trial hearing, talking about court TV and publicity has made me look bad, yet here you are on Dateline. Make it make sense, right? Now, Keith says they only had 90 minutes, and we're talking from setup to doing the interview. And he says often, it can take like an hour just to set things up. And he was like, I still felt like this could be plenty of time to get what we needed for this particular thing. But he says at the end of it, it just turned out that it was not enough time to spend with Lori.
I could have gone on with her for a lot longer.
Amen, brother. We were here for it if you wanted to. Okay. Now, Nate says that Lori told him she wanted to meet with Keith prior to sentencing in Idaho, but the Idaho was like, nah, we ain't allowing cameras up in here. Okay. So then Nate's going to ask, well, what was it like being face to face with her in the interview? And oh boy, does Keith have a lot to say.
She winked at our cameras on the way in.
Now, we saw her doing all that, right? She loves this attention. Now, Keith will say that she was upbeat, friendly, and even flirtatious at times, which I felt like we saw as well. But he also says there's an undercurrent of anger, which again, we saw this as well. He'll say she bounced all over the map, that she had her own agenda. She knew how much time she had, he would say, and that she's no dummy, and that he said that she felt like she had pre-planned basically to come in here and fill the time up with some of her dramatics that we saw take place to avoid those hard-hitting questions. Nate will say that he's spoken to people who have worked with her in maybe a legal sense, as well as the family, and that they describe conversations with her in a very similar manner to Keith's experience. And Keith will go on to say that a psychiatrist would have a field day with her, and that her diagnosis of the delusions with like a religious component definitely seems to be there and definitely seems to be deeply rooted.
She doesn't see herself as mentally ill. She sees herself as the only one who has the key to the truth.
Now, that's one of the dynamics with Lori that we've often wondered and still do, does she believe this stuff, right? So I thought it was interesting that he said that. Now, Nate will ask Keith on the subject of Lori being her own attorney. He's like, did Lori have a sense of maybe arrogance, kind of being like, well, I'm calling the shots, I'm representing myself, And Keith says, no, it was more of like she knows there's a learning curve and the judge is being pretty cool about how things are going and whatnot. And basically she just wants to do things her way and for people to hear what the truth is, what her truth is, I guess you could say. Nate will then ask what was Keith's most surprising moment of the conversation. And Keith will say it was how engaged and intelligent Lori was. This was very interesting to me.
You begin to sort of ask a certain line of questions. She knows exactly where you're going, and she has a dance to get out of it. And she does that quite skillfully.
I think this part's very interesting because I think it goes to show that she is aware of right and wrong and what she has done in her ability to kind of skirt around that issue. Keith will say, almost like pondering out loud, did people get the impression that I liked Lori? And he'll say, in a way I did, it's kind of odd. But that, he's also aware that this is someone who was convicted of taking the lives of her children, of other nefarious things that were about to go on trial for Charles Vallow, for Brandon Boudreaux. And Keith will say that even though he was frustrated that they didn't have enough time, that he would go back to do another interview if he could. Now, Nate will also ask, does Keith see how people can be charmed and attracted to Lori? And I love this question. And Keith has this to say about it.
I could see how she could be the ringleader in a group of people who were addicted to some kind of out there idea.
Now that part right there is fascinating to me because I think that she definitely has this ability, and I think oftentimes a lot of cult leaders have that ability. It's how they get people to do what they do for them, and she definitely seems to have that ability. Now Nate will also ask how this interview compares to other defendants and people that Keith has interviewed. Obviously he's interviewed a lot, and he'll say, I don't really compare it, and he'll cite this example of like a preacher that he interviewed who had unlived his family, took them apart, did things, but yet this, preacher still thinks he's going to be with him in the afterlife. And he'll say, but there is almost like, I think he used the word like wacky component to this preacher. But he was like, with Lori, there's not that component, that she has this way of making the conversation enjoyable, even though he came out of it completely exhausted, right? So I think that's interesting to see. It gives us insight into how she's able to keep going and probably how she's going to, fare well behind prison walls and whatnot. Now, Nate will then ask Keith what his conversation with Colby was like. Colby is Lori's oldest son. And Keith was like, it's very heartfelt. And he'll talk about all the things that Colby's been through and is going through, and how, he just has a lot of sympathy, and, his heart goes out to Colby. He'll talk about how, the family dynamics of this are so intricate. I mean, this was his mother. He was very close to her when they were growing up. And then obviously this happens, right? If you've been following Colby's channel, be sure to check it out, Colby Ryan. You'll know, he's interviewed her and whatnot. And so you can kind of see those family dynamics playing out. It's tragic. Now, Keith will also ask Nate how this story compares with some of his other stuff that he covers in Idaho. And like Keith and other people, Nate will say there really is no comparison with this story. It's just so unique, so tragic, and so heartbreaking. So I really enjoyed, number one, Keith going to the jail and talking to Lori, and the fact that they even let him do this. That was amazing, right? But also his insights into this of what is it like to sit in the room with her? What is it like to talk to her? And to hear that, yes, she has this ability to charm and to humor her way through things, but that also she has an agenda. She knows how to skirt around things. She still knows how to get what she wants in her own way. So I'm curious to hear what you think. If you are still listening, well, I appreciate it. If you could drop it off in the comments section, guess what? While you're down there, do me a little bit of favor. Drop some sofas off down there, especially since we don't got any back here right now. Okay. For Rosco and Spirit, for Bo and Luke, and for the rest of the Sofa Squad, we need him to talk about Lori, Stephanie, Lazarus, all these cases we talk about here at the Sofa Squad. And until we get on down there in that comment section to do all that, I'll see y'all soon. I just wanted to say thank you again for watching the whole video, and also thank you for being part of the Sofa Squad. Special thanks to all the Patreon members, channel members from both of my channels, everybody who likes, shares, subscribes, comments in the comment sections. It helps the channel out so much. Now, don't forget, I do have that other channel, the podcast channel. That's where we go live, we hang out, we talk. We have kind of sort of a schedule, but just be sure and check it out. I'll put it up here on the screen. And then, like I said in the beginning of the video, if you want to follow me and Rosco on the Instagram, go on, check it out. It's right here on the screen again. But once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate you being part of the Sofa Squad, and I'll see you in the next video.